So, normally there are three things in which Yom Tov and Shabbat are different. What are the three things?
You can
You
cook.
can light a new fire with an existing one.
You can carry.
Yes.
You can cook.
You can cook.
Yes. So you got all three. Ach. Okay. All this is learned from the same verse in. Well, that's not the one. It should be in. Okay. And this is taken from Shmot Yud Beit. That's what it says. Okay. So this is Shmot 12:17. Shmot 12:17. So that's Shmot 12:17. And it's mentioned about Pesach, which is, of course, the first of the Yamim Tovim, we call holidays. It should be said that the term Yom Tov in the Torah always refers to a holiday. That's why, modern Hebrew, until maybe 25 years ago, people would say Yom Na'im, have a pleasant day. But when people who didn't know Hebrew so well came to Israel, they started translating good day, and it became Yom Tov. But Yom Tov doesn't make any sense, because that means it's a holiday. So I'm telling you, in biblical Hebrew, Yom Tov is a holiday. So So you can tell that was what I call the secular influence of those who didn't speak Hebrew very well. Okay, so let's get back to this. As you can see in a second, where to go? Here. So this is the verse in Shmot Yud Beit. On the first day, Bayom Rishon, it is a holiday, a holy day of Pesach. The first day of Pesach is a Yom Tov. Bayom HaShvi'i, and on the seventh day, it's also a sanctified day. And what is the definition of a sanctified day? Kol malacha lo ye'aseh bahem. No work shall be done on those days, just like on Shabbat. There are 39 categories. Work will not be done on those days. Except asher yachel chol nefesh, only things that are enable a person to eat. A nefesh, a person, a soul, to eat. That's something that you can do on those days. So, if you want, you can look at the English too. Here's the English. Targum. You shall celebrate a sacred occasion on the first day, a sacred occasion on the seventh day. No work shall be done on them, only when a person is to eat. This person is to eat, that alone may be prepared for you. So the Midrash and the Mechalta and the Talmud says, this means, of course, that a person can do things which enable them to eat. But this is only for a person, not for an animal. So what can you do to enable you to eat? You can light a fire from an existing fire, because without the fire, it's hard to, certain foods you can't eat. And the other thing you can do is carry things in a public area, because let's say you have to bring the food from one house to another. So all these things are directly connected to ochal nefesh, things that a person needs to eat. And that's the difference between Yom Tov and Shabbat. Three things all connected to the same thing. You can cook, which of course means you can also bake, and you can light a fire from an existing flame, and you can carry in a public area even with no eruv. Now, how is Yom Kippur different from the other Yamim Tovim, from the other holidays? So how is Yom Kippur different?
We fast.
Yes, of course. But I mean, as far as the issue of melacha.
I imagine if you are eating, there's no reason to justify carrying food or using a flame to cook.
Right. So first of all, on Yom Kippur, these things are not allowed. So I guess the logic would be exactly what you just said, because if I don't eat on Yom Kippur anyhow, I don't need to light a fire from a fire. I don't need to carry in a public place, and I definitely don't need to cook or bake. So yes, it makes a lot of sense. And then Yom Kippur is like Shabbat, and that's the way we see it too. So now, what's interesting is this was pointing out the Vilna Gaon. You have 7 holy days during the year, which means days which are sanctified and we abstain from work, in addition to the Shabbat. What are the 7? Let's start from the beginning of the calendar year, just to make it easy. Rosh Hashanah originally was 1 day. The Torah says about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Zikaron Yelachem, a day of memorial or memory shall you have. A day. The Torah says a day specifically. In another place, it says Yom Zichron Teruah, a day of memory and blowing the shofar. A day. A day is a day. Can't get more specific than that. Does anybody know why we keep 2 days of Rosh Hashanah?
Yes, because it falls on the first day of the month. So because before the fixed calendar needed to observe the moon and deliver the news that this is the first day of the month, but because there wasn't enough time on the first day, it was crucial that people know when the actual holiday is. So just in case, we kept the 2 days.
Okay, very good. So let me just elaborate that slightly. As you know, in antiquity, the new moons were sanctified based on testimony of 2 witnesses who would see the moon. Why? Even though we have a fixed calendar today, it's a mitzvah to have those 2 witnesses come, bear testimony at the Beit HaMikdash of the Sanhedrin, and then the Sanhedrin sanctifies the new month. Because every Hebrew month can be either 29 or 30 days, because it takes the moon 29 and a half days to rotate around the earth. Therefore, every month is either 29 or 30. Usually, if the previous one was 29, the next one's 30. It could happen theoretically that 2 are 29 and then 30. It could also happen that 2 are 30 and then 2 are 29. That's also possible, because it depends when exactly you saw the new moon. So, now that's why in antiquity, when they used to send messengers to Chutz La'aretz, to Babylonia, on horseback, it would take them a good 2 weeks to get there, to come back. So and since our holidays usually start on the 15th, like Sukkot and Pesach, the people in Babylonia were not sure what the previous month was and when Pesach is supposed to be. It was a question of a day. Was the previous month 29 days or 30 days? Could be both without a fixed calendar. And therefore, they would celebrate 2 days of Yom Tov 15 and 16, and 2 days of the end of Pesach, the 7th and the 8th day. And so that's why Pesach outside of Israel and Shavuot and Sukkot are 1 day more than in the land of Israel. Now, same thing Rosh Hashanah. When is Rosh Hashanah going to be? Now, in Israel, we know that as far as we know, at the beginning of the first temple, Rosh Hashanah was actually only 1 day. Somehow, in the middle of the second temple period, Rosh Hashanah became 2 days. And probably because they realized that even in the land of Israel, until the shlichim, the emissaries from the Beit Hadin, can go around Israel and say, yes, the 2 witnesses came yesterday, and they said that last month will be now 29, or last month will be 30, it takes also more than 24 hours to go around the country. So therefore, it became a necessity, an imperative to even Rosh Hashanah to be 2 days in the land of Israel. So the second day in the land of Israel is also rabbinic. Just like Yom Tov Sheni outside of Israel is rabbinic, the second day of Rosh Hashanah is rabbinic, because it's because of the safek, of the doubt, when exactly Rosh Hashanah would be. The Talmud, however, tries to strengthen Rosh Hashanah and say that it's like one long day, Yom Arichta, meaning don't belittle it. Both days are just as important. And as you know, when we don't blow shofar on the first day, Rosh Hashanah, because if it falls out on a Shabbat, we don't blow the shofar, we do it on the second day. Now, that would be a very strange thing to do if the second day is rabbinic and the first day is from the Torah, which it probably is. But again, because they treated both days as completely equal, so this just continued. There's more to say about that, but this is the way it continued. Okay, so now a big cat just walked in. Oh, I know that one. Okay, so there's another unusual. So Yom Kippur, as I said, we cannot cook, we cannot light fire from existing fire, and you cannot carry, even for a person who is sick and is not allowed to fast on Yom Kippur. They can eat, but they can't cook. In fact, when you eat on Yom Kippur because you must, for medical reasons, you say Ya'aleh v'yavo in Birkat HaMazon, and you say Al Yom HaKippurim Hazeh. So, because you're doing it not as a transgression, you're doing it because the halacha necessitates that you eat at Yom Kippur. My father always fasted on Yom Kippur. And he even fasted when he probably shouldn't have, because he had issues and he was taking a diuretic, he had heart issues, whatever. And there was a Yom Kippur in his last year, really. Yom Kippur, he fasted on Yom Kippur. He took only one of the diuretic that day, not the whole, not two. And after Yom Kippur, we had to bring him to the hospital. They had to give him infusion, they had to whatever, or another diuretic. I forget what it was, but. And then his cardiologist said, Rabbi Shochat, next year, you cannot fast on Yom Kippur anymore. Do you understand? But my father didn't live to that next Yom Kippur, so that never happened. Yeah. So, okay. Getting back to this. So there's one other unusual thing on Yom Kippur. As you know, normally on a Yom Tov, like on Rosh Hashanah, what do you do for Havdalah? I'm talking about a regular Havdalah like this year, when it's on a Wednesday night. Not the famous Yak Nahaz, which Rabbi Aryeh loves to talk about, if it happens on a Saturday night. I'm talking about a regular Wednesday night. How do you do Havdalah after Yom Tov?
I might be wrong, but I think on wine.
Wine and fire.
Yes, wine or grape juice or even beer, because Havdalah, I said just on Shabbat, you can also be more lenient for Havdalah, any important beverage. However, what do we say in Havdalah? Is there fire? Is there besamim?
For a Yom Tov, you still do fire, but we don't do the samim,
No.
right?
On Yom Tov, you don't do fire because you can light a fire from an existing fire. Remember, second day Rosh Hashanah, we light the candles from an existing flame. You put aside a ner neshama, let's say a memorial candle, which goes for about 24 hours. You can get a 48-hour one too, and you can light your Chag candles, your Yom Tov candles from the ner neshama, from the memorial candle. So yes, we do light the candles on the second night, and of course we have to therefore also have a fire. And therefore we don't have a fire at Havdalah after a Chag because we benefited from fire. We lit a fire from an existing fire on Yom Tov. We also don't do the besamim. The reason why officially the besamim is on Shabbat is because Shabbat we have neshama yetera, which means almost like an extra soul or the excessive soul. Let's say an excessive sensitivity to spirituality, let's call it. And on Yom Tov, it's different. It's not the same as on Shabbat. Therefore, we don't have the besamim. The besamim is as if when the extra soul is taken away from us, we need smelling salts to wake us up. It's like we get a little faint. So that's the besamim of Motzei Shabbat. So there's no besamim and no candle after Yom Tov. The exception is The exception is
Yom Kippur, maybe, because
Yom
we also
Kippur.
don't light the fire.
Yom Kippur, we do light a fire on Yom Kippur. Why? Most probably because, first of all, Yom Kippur is referred to as Shabbat. It says in the Torah, Shabbat, Shabbaton hilachem. It is the Sabbath of Sabbaths. So already the very fact that Yom Kippur is called a Sabbath already would mean that we should equate it with a Shabbat. So we don't light a flame from his existing flame. And again, it's for two reasons. Both because of what we said before, that there's no reason to eat on Yom Kippur. So then the other things fall on the wayside too. Then there's no reason to light a fire from existing fire. There's no reason to carry. But also because the Torah itself refers to Yom Kippur as a Shabbat, a Sabbath of Sabbaths. And therefore we equate it to the Shabbat with all the 39 categories of work. But we still don't do the B'samim because it isn't an official Shabbat. But we do do the Ner. We do the Havdalah candle when Yom Kippur is over. Because in that sense, it's like a Shabbat, because we don't benefit from fire in Yom Kippur normally. We don't light a flame from an existing flame. Are you with me? Okay. There's one odd thing in Yom Kippur that I still to this day wonder what else is behind it. Normally on Shabbat, we light a flame, the Havdalah candle, and we make a blessing. Which blessing on the Havdalah candle? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam.
Meorei ha'esh.
Borei meorei ha'esh, who created the light of fire. On Yom Kippur, you could, but the official minhag is to light the Havdalah candle from an existing flame. Now, this is strange. Why should I have to light the Havdalah candle from an existing flame? On Shabbat, I don't have to do that. On Yom Tov, I do that, but on Yom Tov, I don't wait for Yom Tov to finish to do that. So it's a little bit strange. There are various comments about this, where this minhag came from. To light from Ner Sheshavat, that's the term that they use. A fire that observed the Sabbath, meaning it was there on the Sabbath. You would think if it observed the Sabbath, it wouldn't be there on the Sabbath. But that's just the appellation. It's called the fire that was there on the Sabbath already. So we try to light from an existing flame after Yom Kippur is over. So the best explanation I could find at the moment was, the Midrash says, and of course it's the simple meaning of the book of Genesis, that Adam and Eve were created on day 6. Now, Adam and Eve, by the way, in day 6 is the day that we commemorate Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah commemorates the 6th day of creation, the day that Adam and Eve were created. And that's what the Talmud says in Rosh Hashanah. And it makes a lot of sense, because for us, what happened before there was Adam and Eve, slightly irrelevant, because we, as human beings, were not around. So whatever God did, that's okay. But we commemorate for the moment that human life came into the world, which is called the 6th day of creation. There's a lot to say about that too, because the enumeration, by the way, of years, where we count 5,786, is based on the enumeration from the 6th day of creation. Now you might say, hey, what's the big deal? It's just another 5, right? Yes, but that's assuming that all the days of creation were 24 hours. And it's true that there are opinions like that, but there are overwhelming opinions that say otherwise. So I'm just saying that it's not a simple thing. So even the enumeration we have of 5,786, which begins in the 1st century of the Common Era, possibly at the beginning of the 2nd century, in a book written by a Tana, a Mishneh scholar called Yossi ben Chalafta. And the book is referred to as Seder Olam, the chronology of the world. So this book, again, is written right after the destruction of the first temple. And he tries to calculate from the book of Genesis, from the time Adam and Eve were sent out of the garden, all the years enumerated in the Torah up to his, and past the Torah up to his day. Based on his calculation, the calculation of Yossi ben Chalafta, today we come to 5,786. And Yossi ben Chalafta's calculation starts with Adam and Eve leaving the Garden of Eden. So then again, we don't actually have a calculation from day one. Now again, you can say, okay, add 5 days, you got it. It's true, there is a minhag like that. There's actually a Sephardic minhag that on the 25th day of Elul, 5 days before Rosh Hashanah, there's some people who celebrate the creation of the universe. It's not very popular, but it does exist. But again, that's based on the assumption that these are days of 24 hours, which is really not, it's an assumption. And it's an assumption which is actually a difficult assumption to make. And this is all I'll say about it at the moment. It's a difficult assumption to make because if you remember, a day is calculated by the Earth revolving around its axis vis-a-vis the sun, right? So in order to have a day of 24 hours, you need the Earth to turn, and you need a sun. Because it takes the Earth 24 hours more or less until it comes back to the same point where the sun shone on that point 24 hours before. That's why a day is 24 hours. The only problem is in Genesis 1, the sun was created on day 4. So, hey, what's going on? It was evening, it was morning, day 1, evening was morning, day 2, evening was morning, day 3, but there's no sun. So how did you calculate the evening and the morning? So I just wanted to point out that it's not a simple assumption. Okay, that's all I wanted to point out. I've written about this. If you're interested, I have a few articles about this. The latest one was in Hebrew, but I also have in English. So, oh yes. So the Midrash says, Adam and Eve were created on Friday, day 6. Now, on Friday, there are 12 temporal hours during the day, during the light time. And the Talmud says what happened during every hour. On the 5th hour, they stood up. Adam and Eve. 5th hour, they stood up, meaning Adam. On the 6th hour, Adam called names to all the animals. On the 7th hour, Chava was taken from his rib or his side. In the 8th hour, they had children. The 9th hour, they ate from the tree and were banished from the Garden of Eden. So, by the way, there's a lot to say. I'm sorry?
Can I ask you something real fast?
Yeah, that's a quote, by the way, the Talmud in Sanhedrin chapter 4. Yes. There's a little bit of noise here. Somebody's building their sukkah exactly now.
Sorry. How long were the hours back then? Because I'm sure it wasn't 60 minutes. They went through, how do I say, what's the words I'm looking for? They were going through a different time process. 6 hours didn't equate to 6 hours today.
Okay. It's not clear. It's not clear. On the one hand, there's no reason to think that, well, first of all, temporal hours are always different. It's no more than 72 minutes, no less than 50. You know what I mean? Temporal hours, we talked about that. Sha'ot Zmaniyot or halachic hours, where you take the daylight. And so in the summer, the day is longer than the winter, etc., and vice versa. So, but if you're asking how your watch works, your watch is always at an hour, 60 minutes. That's the way your watch works. right? So I think your question is, would a day have more than 24 hours in it, right? That's your question. Correct?
Yes, sir. Sorry, just
Yeah.
trying to unmute.
So that's the question. Would a day have more than 24 parts to it? We're not familiar with that. The only question is, are these 6 days of creation 6 days, or are they an idea? Meaning, does the real world start when Adam and Eve leave the Garden of Eden? And whatever happened in that Garden of Eden is part of the secrets of the Torah, like the Talmud says in Chagiga, chapter 2, that it's part of the secrets of the Torah. And look, if everything was just to be understood the way the text says it, where's the secrets? I'll also give you an example in the book of Bereshit that the word Yom does not necessarily mean 24 hours. When Abraham's servant, Abraham's servant, who we call Eliezer, went to look for a wife for Yitzchak, he went to Laban's house in Aram, today's Syria. And he meets Rebecca by the well, Rivka. And he asked God, help me find a woman who is, harmonious to Yitzchak, who can be a wife. And Rivka comes from the well and she says, can I give you to drink and pour for your camel? Exactly what Eliezer asked for. And he sees that, and then he tells the story to Laban. Laban says, you know what? This is from God. Take Rivka, you got her. And then, of course, the servant of Abraham gives all the gold and the silver to Rivka, and the fruit and the nuts he gives to the father. so then the father turns to him and says, on second thought, let the girl stay with us for a year or 10 months before she goes. The Hebrew for a year or 10 months is shana is yamim or asor, days or 10. Days meaning years, 10 meaning 10 months. Meaning they were trying to procrastinate because they didn't like the idea all of a sudden that Rivka is going away, because they thought they would get all this money, all this dowry from the servant. Turns out all the dowry went directly to Rivka. But the term there is yamim or asor, days or 10. And the Rashi and all interpret it meaning either years or 10 months. And of course, the servant of Abraham says, no, I can't wait, I have to go. And you said it's from God, let us go. Whatever. So he leaves tomorrow morning, the next day. But there you see that Yamim is not 24 hours, it's years. There are other places like that too, in Leviticus, in Bamidbar, when it talks about the Yovel, and it talks about a person who sells his land until the Jubilee. Also, they use the term there, Yamim, for years. So I'm just saying that Yamim sometimes means otherwise than a day of 24 hours. And definitely in the creation story, as I said, there's a reason to think so. So many people think that the days in creation, when I say many people think, I'm talking about in the last 600 years, think that the days of creation might have been much longer than 24 hours. Some people say thousands of years. That's Rav Shlomo Elyashov, Kabbalist from the 19th century. Some say maybe there was no time at all at that point. There are different points of view. And there are those who say 6 days times 24 hours. There's an interesting book written by Gerald Schroeder, Dr. Gerald Schroeder. He's a physicist. It's called Genesis and the Big Bang. He has a very interesting idea there. If you have the time, you should read it. Gerald Schroeder, Genesis and the Big Bang. He lives here in Jerusalem. Okay, let's get back to this. So why am I mentioning that? So the Midrash says that when Adam and Eve, after they sinned by eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, so of course the sun set eventually, and it was Shabbat because it was a Friday night. And they thought that the sun set because God was destroying the universe because of their sin. Because remember, God said the day you eat from it, you will die. They figured, okay, this is what's happening. And then the next morning, the sun came up and they realized that's just the way of nature. And the Midrash says that Adam then sang a song for the song of Shabbat, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat, Tehillim 91, which we recite. And it's one of the Tehillim of David today. It's ascribed to Adam, who was jubilant after he realized God didn't destroy the universe after their sin. And then Motzei Shabbat, when it got dark a day, again, and Adam and Eve realized that this is the way of the world, he took 2 stones together, rubbed them, discovered fire, and that's the beginning of our Havdalah. Because it's the beginning of our Havdalah on Yom Kippur, which is sort of the first Shabbat of the year, but not exactly. So, because there was a Shabbat before, but in Yom Kippur, we want to do the same thing. We want to use a fire which we treat differently than the fire that we use at Havdalah all during the year. So we light it from an existing flame. That's one of the interpretations. I'm still have to look into it more because I don't find necessarily all the interpretations satisfactory. But I will look into it more, but that's the one I've seen lately that I think could be a possible interpretation. So the minhag is to light a fire from existing flame, but if you don't, you can do it like the regular Havdalah candle of Shabbat. In any case, but there's no besamim. Question. Oh, I will point out that the Vilna Gaon 200 years ago points out we have 7 days in the year, aside from Shabbat, that you don't do milacha, that you don't do work. 1 day Rosh Hashanah, because I told you biblically Rosh Hashanah is 1 day. 1 day Yom Kippur. First day of Sukkot. Shmini Atzeret, which is like the 8th day, because the last day of Sukkot is like every other day of Sukkot. Just called Hoshana Rabbah. Then you have the first day of Pesach. Then you have the last day of Pesach. Then you have the 1 day of Shavuot, like in the land of Israel. So you actually have 7 Yamim Tovim, 7 days, which Yom Tov, which you abstain from work like on a Sabbath, except for 3 things. And Yom Kippur is referred to the Sabbath of the Sabbaths, meaning the Sabbath of all the Yamim Tovim. That's why it's referred to as a Sabbath, according to the Vilna Gaon. Makes sense to me. So I wanted to mention that.
Rabbi, question. Why is the 7th day of Pesach a Yom Tov, but the 7th day of Sukkot isn't a Yom Tov?
Because that's what the Torah says.
Okay, good answer.
Yeah. You know the story that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, so he was knighted by the queen. He was actually a knight. And by the way, when you, he was knighted by the queen, so he was in what do they call it again? The Chamber of Lords. He was a member of the Chamber of Lords in the English Parliament. And in advance, he told whoever was in charge of the ceremony, he can't bow down before the queen like everybody else, but he can bend over if that's okay, because Jews don't bow down before human beings. So they figured out what's going to happen. And okay, she said, you can just bow down without kneeling, whatever. And that's the ceremony that he did. So the story goes that somebody saw Rabbi Sachs bowing down before the queen in an awkward way where he's just bending over and not bowing down, said to himself, why is this night different than every other night? Okay, getting back to this. They're sort of like knights of the queen. Okay. So, let's continue this. Back to Shabbat. In the booklet, there are a few things here on pages 28 and 29, which I'm going to just mention them quickly so that we can go forward, because I'd like to get to one or two. I'd like to get to the laws of Muktze tonight also, if I can. Okay? So I'll just mention them. This is the Shulchan Aruch, the laws of Shabbat 306. Things that have to do with a mitzvah, you're allowed to do on Shabbat. So, for instance, if you have to know how much, you want to talk about how much tzedakah you collected during the week and who to give it to, that's okay. Because that's not business. It's God's business. It's not our business. Right? Heftzei shamayim. It's things for heaven and not necessarily things for us. You can also make a shidduch, set somebody up on Shabbat. You can also teach somebody a book, or even umanut. One moment. Okay, the shidduch you can do, lamdos sefer umanut. What does he say about that here? Right, because and this is actually interesting. The Shulchan Aruch says that you're allowed to study a book which helps you towards your occupation. You would say, hey, I'm studying in university, I can study this book at Shabbat. It says, yes, because a person needs an occupation, so it's a mitzvah. The Talmud says that it's a mitzvah for a father to help their son get an occupation. And in the modern world, that would include the daughter, because in modern society, men are not necessarily the ones supporting women anymore. The whole part of the ketubah is based on the idea in the Torah that a man has 3 obligations towards his new wife. And even when she's not a new wife, even after years. It's 3 things. She'er ksut ve'ona, which means clothing, food, and marital relations. So in other words, he has to supply her with clothing. He has to put food on her table, even if he doesn't eat. And he can't run off for half a year because he has meetings. These are obligations towards his wife. However, the Talmud says something very interesting about the parnasah one, about the food and the clothing. That a woman can say to her husband, you know what? The Talmud says, in turn, because the man works to bring food and clothing to the woman, so she takes care of the house and brings up the kids. So the Talmud says in Gita, and a woman can say to her husband, you know what? I don't want to take care of the house. I don't want to bring up the kids. I'm going to go work. So forget about, you don't owe me food. You don't have to buy me clothes. I'm just going to go get a job. Talmud says that's okay. They can make that type of agreement. But it has to be an agreement. If there's no agreement, then his obligation does not change. But if a woman says, I don't need your food, I don't need your begadim, because I want to go out and support myself, they're allowed to make that decision or agreement. It's like there was a rabbi who once said here in Jerusalem, in every family you need a man and you need a father and a mother, but it's okay if the mother is the father and the father is the mother, or the male is the mother. I mean, whichever they want to take upon themselves, that's okay. But probably sociologically, you need both. I knew this woman one time in one of the minions here in Tel Aviv. She was a Murad Derech, and she married a guy who didn't have a job. So she went out to work, and he stayed home bringing up the kids. It's okay. And that was the agreement, if you understand. Yeah. So that's not actually foreign to halakha, because it's already discussed in the Talmud and Gita. So, this cat really wants food. Nothing I can do about that now. So, okay, so I wanted to point that out. That's why they can even read a book that has to do with the occupation that they eventually want to do, which you would think would not be so.
Wait, does that mean if I'm in Ulpan, I can do my Ulpan homework?
No, because you can't write.
Okay, but I can read.
Theoretically, yeah. If it helps you in your occupation, then theoretically that. I'm just telling you what the Shulchan Aruch says. But writing, of course not.
Okay.
You can't write on Shabbat. You can read the story again and again to see if it, which is interesting because some people call it Uvdin Dechol. Meaning, okay, let's say theoretically it's allowed, but hey, if I don't need to, why am I doing it on Shabbat? Which I totally understand.
Rabbi, about the tzedakah thing, you were talking about it, but it's not like you're physically counting the money.
No.
Okay,
we're just
that's super
discussing.
muktze.
The tzedakah, who should it be for this year? Because we raised a certain amount of money. Maybe it's not enough. No, it's only the discussion itself. But in general, we don't talk about business because in Yeshayahu there's a verse that says, "Im tashib mi Shabbat raglecha." Many people say it before Kiddush on Yom Shabbat. If you shall hold back your feet on the Sabbath, that's why officially you don't run on Shabbat. You're supposed to walk leisurely. However, the Talmud says that you can run to go to a minyan or to get to the house for dinner, the Shabbat dinner, because you're running for a mitzvah. For a mitzvah, you can always run. But running for the sake of running, on Shabbat, you're supposed to walk leisurely. Im tashimi Shabbat raglecha, asot chavatzecha b'yom kodshi, meaning don't do your needs on the Sabbath. Business is considered your needs. V'karata l'Shabbat oneg, mikdosh Hashem mechubad, v'chibadato me'asot derachecha, and don't do your normal ways on Shabbat. Mimtzo chefsecha v'daber v'davar, and don't even talk about them. Therefore, we say that you're not allowed to talk about business deals on Shabbat.
But if someone asks you about your career, is it rude to be like, sorry,
what's your career? You
can
can talk about your career. You can't talk about any specific deal that you want to do or are planning to do.
Okay.
So even if you walk into shul and the guy you were looking for all week is just sitting at one row in front of you, no. You can say to him, wow, I looked for you all week. How could I find you next week? That you could say. But not more than that. People have a problem with that. A lot of time what people do became a sort of a minhag. People that want to talk about something with business, they say, in Yiddish we say, Nis Shabbos geret. It's not something I talk about on Shabbat, but which became like almost like a joke. There's a story about this guy comes into synagogue and he says, Moshe, says, yeah. Says, Moshe, didn't you tell me you were looking for an apartment? Moshe says, yeah. Says, yeah, Yitzhak. So he says, this Shabbos geret, but I happen to have one. Okay. He sees him again at Shachrit. Says, Yitzhak, you said you have an apartment. Says, yeah, this Shabbos geret. Says, is it near the price I'm looking for? So yeah, very next to the price that you were talking about before. He says, Nish Shabbos geret, I'm thinking about it seriously. They come back from Mincha. So Moshe says, no, Yitzchak. So you know that apartment? He says, yeah. He says, Nish Shabbos geret, but yeah, I'm willing to get it. Moshe says, I'm sorry, Nish Shabbos geret, but it's already sold. So yeah, you don't do that. No, you don't play around with those things. However, let's say I'm reading an article in a newspaper and it's talking about how much money Bill Gates made last month and what business deals he's doing. I can read that on Shabbat because it's absolutely irrelevant to me. So, meaning you can read about what happened, what other people did, if that's going to give you a good time, but because it's irrelevant to what you do, so it's not discussing business. Business is something which is relevant to you. That's, yeah. Okay. Wanted to mention that, and we'll go a little bit further. Officially, you cannot give, page 29, you cannot give a gift on Shabbat. Why not? When you give a gift to somebody, it's called an acquisition, kinyan. The rabbis felt the kinyan was not proper on Shabbat. It's a business transaction. It has actual ramifications in halacha, and therefore it's like creating something new, a new ownership of something. It might be rabbinic, but it was not allowed on Shabbat. So the rabbi said you're not allowed to buy something on Shabbat, and you're not allowed also to sell something on Shabbat, and you cannot even give a gift on Shabbat because it's also a transaction. It
Uh,
belongs
but
to me now, it belongs to you. So what do? You go to somebody's house with a bottle of wine. It's a gift. The two things you can do. Number one is which is the easiest thing to do. You say, this is a gift for after Shabbat. But it's on the table. They can use it during the meal. You're there, right? But it's a gift for after Shabbat. You finish it now. You finish it now. That's up to you. Another thing you can do is, before Shabbat, you go over to someone and say, you are the shaliach, emissary for such and such, and I'm giving you now this bottle on their behalf that now belongs to them from before Shabbat. Okay, a technical way of doing that. I find number one the easiest, though. You don't have to start looking for people and whatever. So, yeah.
Can I also like not give it as a gift, just invite them? Like I, for
Well, if you invite them, you're
example,
not
pour
giving
the
them a
wine,
gift.
or I cut the cake and you want to eat with me the cake.
Yeah, you can say that, but
It's
that's a
like,
bit weird. No, I find it's just better to say this is a gift for after Shabbat, and if you want to use it down the dinner, up to you. So, yeah, that's the way I look at it.
Even for this also applies all to Yom Tovs too.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you repeat the second part, please?
I'm sorry?
Can you repeat the second part, please? The second part about how you can give it to them on Shabbat.
Oh, I said you have this idea that zakin ladam shalol fanav, which means you can do something on for somebody which is in their benefit, even if they don't know about it. Because if you ask them, they would say yes. So you can give a gift to somebody on the behalf of this person, assuming that he would say, yeah, that's a good idea. I would love for this guy to be my emissary and accept it on my behalf. Why not? Just like you can sell somebody's chametz without their knowing it. Because you can assume that they wanted somebody to sell their chametz. They'll be very happy to find out. Okay, if they sold it, then it was just redundant. So, but I'm just saying, if you know they didn't sell it, and you can sell on their behalf, assuming that they would have wanted to be done.
So if
Zakim
you brought
Adam Shalol Lefanav.
so if you brought something to someone on a Yom Tov or on Shabbat and you didn't say, hey, this is a gift for after Shabbat, but then they ended up using that gift at the meal, it's okay?
Probably. It's just more appropriate to say, that if we, or you can also say if we don't use it in the meal, it's a gift for after Shabbat. You can also say that.
Good to know for the future. Thank you.
I like just saying this is a gift for after Shabbat, but hey, whatever you want. So that's people are used to the fact that I do these halachic things. Not everybody, even religious people don't always know the details of certain things in halakha. But if you say it in such a way, then they figure there's something going on. They get that. Okay. There's an exception, by the way. The Talmud says in Tractate Shabbat, you can buy land in the land of Israel even on Shabbat. Now the Talmud says, are you sure you can buy land? It's an acquisition. Talmud says, okay, you should do it through a non-Jew. But you can tell the non-Jew, which is normally not allowed on Shabbat, that you are my emissary to buy the land and to sign the contract on my name on Shabbat. Because if you have a chance to buy land of Israel, even on Shabbat, you can override a rabbinic prohibition. Talmud in Shabbat. Okay. Here, possible methods of giving gifts on Shabbat. Even when a gift is not needed for the purpose of a mitzvah, can be awarded if the transfer of ownership does not take place on Shabbat. This could be in one of two ways. The donor should hand the gift to a third party, that was my second way, who's not a member of the household before Shabbat, have that party lifted 3 handbreadths from the ground, which it probably already is when you gave it to him, and they acquire the possession on behalf of that person. Or you may hand a gift to the recipient with the instruction that you bear in mind not to take the title of it until Shabbat is over, but hey, I allow you to use it anyhow during Shabbat. Okay. Sheilot, question? Here's my, hold it. Okay. There was a very unhappy cat who I think left. That's okay. You need patience to be a Jew. Let's just see if sorry. Okay. I'd now like to start an introduction to the question of Muktze. Muktze differentiates between the knowledgeable religious Jew and the non-knowledgeable religious Jew. Just like Eruv does. You know, you have a lot of Jews in Israel that they grew up in Eruv wherever they went. Especially the ones who are not so learned. They keep Shabbat, but they carry on Shabbat. There's an Eruv wherever they go. And all of a sudden they land up in another country which doesn't have an Eruv on Shabbat, even though it has a Jewish community, like where I was, in Romania, Bucharest, Cluj, Brasov. And they're told that they can't carry on Shabbat. They say, what do you mean? In Israel, everybody carries on Shabbat. Even the Haredim carry on Shabbat. What are you making this up? And you explain, yeah, but in Israel, they have Eruvs everywhere. He says, I never saw an Eruv. Show to me. Actually, if you want to see the Eruv, you just go to the Fisherman Beach. It cuts through the shoreline, right? When you're walking on the sand on the shore. So you can actually see the Eruv there. But it's true, there's some places you can't even see the Eruv because sometimes they do tricks and use existing buildings, existing fences, etc. They used to use the edge of the Tayelet of Tel Aviv to be part of the Eruv, but then I guess they moved it halfway onto the plage, onto the shoreline, because people wanted to carry while they're still walking on the sand. That's what I assume. You can walk past an Eruv, you just can't carry past an Eruv. So when I'm outside of Israel, people can find it quickly. I'll show you my Shabbat invention. Here it is. This is my Eruv belt. So it's made out of 3 keychains. By the way, today it's very fashionable. You see a lot of young people going around with like chains. So I have a chain and everybody thinks, oh, this guy's a cool guy. So, okay. So I actually put it through the loops on top of my belt. And what I do, let me give you an example. Okay, let's take this key as the example, as the key to the house, which I want to carry with me. So, remember, this is going around my waist through the loops, and it comes out here. So this one I attach, I'm talking about one key, to this side of the key. And then the other side of a key is attached to this guy. So now the key itself, forget about this, guys. The key itself is now part of the belt. Because it's part of the belt, I'm using it functionally as part of my dress code, whatever you want to call it, my uniform. So because of that, it's not considered carrying on Shabbat. There are other ways to do it too. I've seen tie clips which were made very well. The rabbi in Bucharest showed me the B'nai Brak belt, which you cannot do outside of Israel. People think you're weird. It's like, basically it's a belt where instead of that tongue which closes the belt, it's a key. That means to get into your house, you have to take your belt off. So you have to pull the key out, open it. And after the door is open, you have to put it back in the belt, put it around you. I mean, they'll think you're nuts. Yeah. So it's a suffix chilul Hashem. So yeah, I don't do that. So they're different people. Met a lot of people from Uman. by the way, in Romania, going to and fro. Okay, let's, so what is Muktze? Muktze is rabbinic. Muktze means there's certain things on Shabbat you cannot move. People think you can't touch them. You can't move them. There are a few categories of Muktze, but the basic idea of Muktze is you cannot move something on Shabbat that you're not allowed to use on Shabbat. Because if I move it, I might use it. See if this is it. That's not the one I wanted. It's not the one I wanted either. Okay, I'm going to read it from your booklet. If you happen to have the booklet. Oh, here it is. Okay, I'll read it right here. I have it in front of us. Okay, one sec. Good. See where it says Muktze? Second. Right here. Let me enlarge it somehow. Okay. Can everybody see it? Muktze? Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Muktze, reasons for the prohibition. This is taken from the Mishnah Berurah and from the book Pnei Halacha. Mishnah Berurah, early 20th century, Pnei Halacha is contemporary, by Malamed. The sages prohibited moving things that are not fitting for Shabbat. That one puts out of the mind. In other words, it's supposed to be muksa midato. It's supposed to be out of your mind, meaning not something you're thinking about on Shabbat. There are two fundamental reasons for this prohibition. Number one, to preserve the atmosphere of Shabbat, of a day of holiness and rest. The idea of rest applies to one's hands as well. They should not be moving objects or be involved with activities that are not Shabbat oriented. Number two, to set up a safeguard, which I think is the more logical one, so that one will not do the melacha on Shabbat. See, if you pick up a pen and you leave it in your pocket, you might use it inadvertently. If you carry your phone on Shabbat and it rings, you might answer it inadvertently. So there's a lot of reason to say that you should not pick up something on Shabbat. It's keeping you one step away from the prohibition. Okay? So in addition to the melachot that are prohibited on Shabbat, the Torah commands us to rest and relax at Shabbat. Like it says, on the seventh day you shall cease, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your maidservant and the stranger may be refreshed. Similar, it says, 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh day there shall be Shabbat of rest, holy to God. In order to fulfill the Torah commandment to rest and relax at Shabbat, the sages established several ordinances to protect the spirit of the day. One of them is the prohibition of Muktze. If moving items unnecessarily for Shabbat were permitted, one might spend all of Shabbat cleaning and arranging their homes and belongings, negating the mitzvah to rest. Additionally, the prophets instructed the people that the atmosphere of Shabbat should be different. Like I said before in Yeshayahu, you're supposed to walk differently and talk differently. You don't talk about your business. You don't run the way you would when you're in a rush to something. Following this line of thought, the sages decreed that people should not handle objects that are not Shabbat oriented. This way, Shabbat is truly felt by all, including those who weekdays activities do not normally involve anything forbidden. For instance, somebody who studies Torah all week. As with all mitzvot, the sages instituted safeguards in order to distance people from sin. The prohibition of Muktze makes it less likely that you will carry an object in a public domain or use Muktze to perform a melacha, to perform a forbidden type of work. The prohibition of Muktze synchronizes the mind and the hands. Any item that one knows is not fit for Shabbat wouldn't be touched either. Okay? That was from the Mishnah Berurah. This Seder. So, Muktze. Muktze means something which is put aside. Here he explains it as Muktze midato. I'm putting it out of mind. I don't want to have to deal with it on Shabbat. Did you see that YouTube video with Charlie Kirk, alav shalom, who said that everybody should try doing a telephone Sabbath? Did you see that YouTube video? It's very interesting. He says, I'm now doing, he says, a Jewish Sabbath of the telephone. I don't use my telephone on Saturday. Nobody calls me. I don't call anybody. And then I can really rest. Yeah. So there's a lot to our Shabbat. You know, when you can't use the phone on Shabbat, you're not a slave to the phone anymore. We think the phone makes us free. It really makes us a slave. It has benefits. I will not knock that. But it also makes us a slave to the one who's calling us. Sometimes, many times. And besides, once upon a time, you can say, I didn't hear the phone ring. I wasn't home. Now that you carry the phone with you, that's hard to make that argument. So yeah, you become like a slave to the phone.
I have a question.
Okay.
Muktze is everything that is not allowed on Shabbat. But food,
You're not allowed to move objects that don't have a Shabbat orientation.
okay. So food is not Muktze,
That's correct.
except the potato.
Why potato?
Um,
I think you're referring to an uncooked potato, which I cannot eat on Shabbat without cooking it. That's why it's muktzeh.
Yes.
Or let's say if I have frozen meat in the freezer, it's muktzeh in the sense that there's nothing I can do with it on Shabbat. I can use it as a door stopper, but I probably won't.
But anything that I don't need to cook, like an apple, I don't know, like something like this,
Well,
I can use it.
Anything that I can eat on Shabbat is not muktzeh.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Say that. Okay, let's keep going over here. Second interpretation. No, not second interpretation. Let's just talk quickly about the categories of muktze. I'll take it from this one, which is from Chinei Halacha, even though I usually do it a little bit differently, but we'll go over it once.
Is this in the book? The book?
Yes. Yes, it is. It starts on the book on page 31, and then it continues a little bit towards the end of the book because I put it in a second time much more clearly. That's why I'm sure I have it in the computer too. A moment. Here, on page 52. It's the categories of Muktze on Shabbat, and there I bring 7 categories. It's actually 5, but it could be, you could see it as 7 categories. That's on page 52 in the booklet. I can read from the booklet if you want and just forget about this. Not a problem. There are 5 categories of Muktze, but the truth is, if you just remember that Muktze is not to move things that have no use on Shabbat, then you got it. That's what Muktze is. Things would come to mind that are Muktze on Shabbat. What would be immediate things to come to mind?
A hammer.
Yeah. Why a hammer?
You're not allowed to build or demolish.
That's right. What else?
Candles,
Why?
because you can't light the fire.
Right. What you just mentioned now is category 3B on page 52. It's called Melachto Sur, which means its basic task is something prohibited on Shabbat. Give me more examples of Melachto Sur. I would say this is the paradigm of Muktze. This is what comes to mind right away when people think of Muktze. Give me other examples of Melachto Sur.
A pen?
Pen. Okay, keep going.
Car keys.
Okay.
Cell phone.
Okay.
TV.
Right.
Money.
Yes. And the reason for money is because I'm not allowed to make an acquisition. And I'm not allowed to carry if there's no Eruv. But if there was an Eruv, I still can't make an acquisition on Shabbat. So that's why it's Melachto Sur. Yes. Anything else?
Well, actually, everything that we cannot use on Shabbos.
Yeah, a lot of things. If you look in Melachtoli Sur on page 52, so he has electrical appliances, pencils, paintbrushes, hammers, saws, screwdrivers, tools. Now here he says also empty pots and pans, but that depends. Which means if it is a frying pan, since there's nothing I can do with a frying pan on Shabbat, theoretically, because maybe I have fish that I want to warm up in the frying pan, right? If it actually has a job on Shabbat, it's not Melachto L'Isur. There are certain things that you can designate their category if it's logical. Meaning, obviously, I can't fry something on Shabbat. But if I had in mind that the fish or the chicken that I fried before Shabbat, I want to just warm it up on Shabbat, then it's not Melachto L'Isur anymore, because I'm putting it on the plata. But I would have to have that in mind when Shabbat came in. So let me give you another example, which is a more obvious example. A hammer. A hammer is Melachto L'Isur. It's to build. You're not allowed to build on Shabbat. But let's say we're doing Seder Tu B'Shvat, which comes out exactly this year on Shabbat. I didn't check. I'm just saying. And I don't have a nutcracker. I have all these walnuts and pistachios and whatever. And a hammer can do the job. If I had in mind, as Shabbat was coming in, or before Shabbat was coming in, that I'm going to use my hammer as a nutcracker, it's okay. It's not Melachto L'Isur anymore, because that makes sense. If I'm going to say I'm using my phone as a nutcracker, that doesn't make sense. But a hammer makes sense. And you have people like that. You find a Brazil nut and you can't break it. You take that hammer and it does it. It does the job. So yes, that makes sense. But it has to make sense, and you had to have had it in mind. Let's say a brick.
With a similar concept.
Wait, I'll give one more example. A brick. A brick is used for building. I found a brick outside that's very nice, but it's Muktze. There's nothing, I don't need that brick. And if I start building, that's not allowed anyhow. But let's say my intention of picking up the brick before Shabbat was to use it as a paperweight or as a door stopper. So the fact that I brought it into the house before Shabbat, it now has a different task. So it's not Melachto L'Isur anymore. So I can use it as a door stopper or as a paperweight. That's not a problem. Yes, what was the question before? Somebody asked the question before.
My question was, if I use a air conditioning remote to check the time, I lift it up to check the time, and that was my intention before Shabbat. Is that okay then, using the same principle?
That's an interesting question. It would be better if you didn't lift it up, but theoretically, if by lifting it up, it's not gonna any danger that you might hit the wrong button, then it's probably okay if that was your intention to use it. Let's say you don't have a watch.
Okay, thank you.
I can give you another example. Let's say you do have a watch, but the watch has a light on it. Used to be a lot of watches that had lights to light up at night. You can wear that on Shabbat because your intention is for it to tell time. Your intention is not necessarily to push the light button. So that's a similar question.
But by the same token, can I wear an Apple Watch? Because I just want to count my steps and I want to check it after Shabbat, how much I walked, just an example.
Wait, but the Apple Watch is doing something on Shabbat for you, right?
Well, it's automatically counting the steps, yes.
Yeah, I think that might be a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
You
have
can
a
ask
question.
Ariel his opinion, but I think it feels to me that it's a problem here.
Okay.
So we had an interesting question in the hotel we were staying in Cluj, because I tried to get Shabbat-friendly hotels, which is getting harder and harder, especially in Europe. Everybody's got a magnetic card for something. You walk in, there's a magnetic card, open your door. Then you take the first step, the lights turn on. It's like you're booby trapped for Shabbat, wherever you go. Take another step, air conditioner goes on. You close the door to leave, air conditioner goes off. A lot of things like that. So we had a place where I found a place where it was keys. And also you could leave the key if you didn't have a Shabbat belt, of course, with the reception. But they did have lights. So there were two possibilities. You could either have a ground floor room where you would come in from the main entrance, so there was no light to go on. But the question is, what about you have these lights, you walk in the corridor, the light goes on. So these are complicated questions. It really depends on the scenario. If I'm walking on a Friday night coming back from shul, and I'm walking on the sidewalk, and I happen to pass by a house where there's a driveway, and the light turns on because I'm walking by, so the sensor flipped it on, that's not my fault. Number one, I had no intention for that light to go on. Number two, it's an indirect action. In Aramaic, that's garama, indirect. Why? Because I didn't do anything. I walked, the sensor picked up my movement and turned it on.
What happens?
Indirect action, which already makes it rabbinic and not from the Torah. Even if you're going to argue that turning electricity is from the Torah, it's a controversy today.
What happens?
It has to do with the definition of electricity. What?
What happens next week when you know that house now has a light with a sensor?
You can either avoid it or still go there. It's not your problem.
Okay, cool.
You don't really benefit from it. That's the third part. You don't actually benefit from it because you're not going towards the garage.
Got you. Makes sense.
It's actually for the garage. It might have some bearing on the sidewalk, but there's street lamps anyhow.
Rabbi, what about like people put these little automatic lights in stairwells?
Right.
And
So that's
like-
what I'm talking about, especially the hotels. That's very common today.
Yeah.
Now, in Yerushalayim, we found this guy who's looking for religious Israelis to come to his apartments. He has these rent-out apartments. So we told him all these things to do. So it's very simple. You can actually put these lights on constant mode. You just flip a switch and they're on 24/7. And when Shabbat's over, you put it back to automated. They always make it sound like it's really difficult, but where there's a will, there's a way in this thing. It's really not difficult. You just put it, it's like the lights in your building, by the way, right? You hit you hit the button and it goes on for a few minutes and turns off. But that's only because it's on automatic. If you go downstairs where the light panel is and you put it on constant, it's on the whole time. So you can do that before Shabbat and then just put it back onto automatic. So the same thing with the hotel thing. Those lights that go off and on, they can be on automatic too. They can be on constant too. It's not very difficult to put that in if the hotel wants to do that. If it doesn't want to do that, then you're sort of like, the question is like this. As I said, it is rabbinic and not from the Torah because it's garama, it's indirect. 100% it's indirect. Number two, this was not your intention. But number three is a problem in the sense that you are benefiting. When the light turns on, it's helping you. Now, you could argue that during the day, if there are windows in the building, you're actually not getting any benefit. You didn't need those lights to go on because there's already light. So you can just not pay attention and go into your room. In other words, because you officially don't derive benefit, and that was not your intention, and it's indirect, then during the day it's not a problem. But what about at night? You can't say you derive no benefit. It's pitch black before this thing goes on. That's a problem. It's a rabbinic problem, but it's a problem. So those are probably better to avoid. If you actually get stuck, it's good to try to not benefit from it as much as you can. Just go directly to the door, don't pay attention, something like that. What I actually do, I actually close my eyes if that happens. But hey, you don't want to bump into things. But I'm saying if you didn't know in advance, then just go towards your door because there's no point in going backwards, right? But as I said, if you're in a scenario like that where that is your room, then as I said, just don't start looking around. Just look straight at your door and go there. That's it. But it's better to be in a scenario, as I said, where either it's only during the day or you don't have lights that going on. But I'm talking about the scenario where it went on anyhow, and you're stuck in that situation. So as I said, focus on your door, forget about all the other things, and just, yeah. You can ask for Vario too. That's fine with me. Okay, so let's mention a few more things about Muktze, and I'll this early. Any questions at this point?
Yes, I have.
Go
You are
ahead.
the first.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to ask about the magnetic key. So, for example, as you said, in today's hotels, I can't even imagine a place which does not have magnetic key. So, if I book a hotel for 1 week and the assumption is it will be magnetic, is that a problem?
It is a problem. There are ways to get around it. First of all, there are some hotels which have keys. And the truth is, I'm actually surprised at hotels that don't. What do you do if there's an electricity shortage? How do you get in and out of the room? I mean, I'm very surprised at the hotels that don't. But you're right, there are many hotels that don't. So one thing you can do like this, and by the way, I saw you can buy this thing online.
Okay.
This is very funny. It's called a shabbat. I forget what it's called. All it basically is, I can tell you what you can do. You get like a piece of electric tape, if you know what I mean, thick tape.
Okay.
Better to have tape that yeah, and you stick it on your door between the tongue of the door and the entrance where it goes into, so that the tongue cannot go into the entrance,
Okay.
and then your door just won't lock.
Okay.
And then when you come back, you'll just be able to open it, but everybody will assume it's locked.
Okay.
If you do that, I would suggest putting your wallet into the safe, which is probably in the room.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's one way you could do it. It's not the best way, but I'm saying it's a possibility. I know somebody else, what he does is he only half shuts the door so that the tongue of the door actually doesn't go into its place. So also the door is not locked. But it's better just to cover it with as I said, with sort of electric tape or a thick tape, and then that'll prevent that from happening. You can double it up even. And as I said, people assume your door is locked when it's not.
Okay. Thank you.
More than that, I really don't have a lot to say. So as I said, I found in Bucharest about four buildings like that. And one of them was where I wanted it to be. So that's it. That's what I did. Did the same thing when I had groups to Poland. I used to be in Krakow on Shabbat. I would get ones that had keys, especially among the 3 stars, you'll find keys.
Yep.
Also in places where you have older buildings, small villages, you'll find keys very easily.
Okay.
They tend to be more Shabbat oriented, not even on purpose. So it's just, yeah. So yeah. Okay. So types of. I'm sorry.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
The first one, what about canned food, like canned tuna?
Can I open up canned food on Shabbat? Yes.
No, right? Yes?
Yes. You can, I think I mentioned this earlier on. Even though you're not supposed to cut and tear on Shabbat, remember you're not supposed to cut the pieces of leather that eventually you're going to write on. Remember the what's called the process of writing? There's cutting, and you're also not supposed to tear the thread in making begadim, making clothing. That's one of the 39 categories. However, cutting and tearing is in order to do something, just like destroying a building is in order to build a building. If you destroy a building without the intention to build a building, it's rabbinically not allowed, but from the Torah, you did nothing. Because it's not creative work. If a person takes a piece of paper and tears it into pieces because they're angry, that's not creative work. That's to make you feel better, catharsis. But you did nothing that will benefit mankind. So that's not disallowed from the Torah. But rabbinically, we don't do that because people might get the wrong idea. That's why, by the way, you can tear toilet paper on Shabbat. For hygiene reasons, the rabbis allowed it. We just tell people in advance to prepare before Shabbat. But if you don't have prepared toilet paper on Shabbat, you can tear it from the toilet paper roll. Some people say it's better not on the lines because then it looks like you're doing it exactly. But even if you did it on the lines, it's not terrible. So I'm just saying the rabbis allowed things which were rabbinic when it has to do with personal hygiene, specifically when it has to do with going to the bathroom, which is something which is a sensitive issue. So, and definitely has to do with personal hygiene. The same issue is with the can. Now, okay, here's a can of corn. Now, nowadays, the cans of corn, by the way, they all have these guys. It used to be you had a can opener to open up your can of corn. Now they just have the pull-out. Now, in Shmirat Shabbat Kihilchata, Rabbi Yeshua Neubert, a very important book. A lot of these yeshivot base their practice on Shabbat on that book. He claims when you open up the can is now it's now a kli. It's a vessel to hold the corn while you're still using it. And therefore, you should make a hole in the bottom of the can, at the bottom of the can, so at least it's not a kli. But he admits that opening the can is like destroying. So it's not the opening of the can. You can open up a box of cookies to eat the cookies on Shabbat. You can rip open a bag of cookies to open them on Shabbat. You can rip open the bag of the soup nuts to use on Shabbat. Because again, ripping open the bag is rabbinic, because you're not going to make a new bag by ripping open the bag. The only possible question is, can you reuse the bag? Well, the bag for the cookies, in a sense, no. I'll tell you why. It's true you'll probably use it till you finish the cookies. You're not going to use it for any other cookies. You know what I mean? The same thing. For the soup nuts, yeah, you'll keep it as long as you have those soup nuts. You're not going to buy soup nuts and start filling up the bag with other soup nuts, because we don't really consider it something that we want to keep around for a long time. So therefore, we don't really consider it a kli. Now here, this looks like a kli. And once upon a time, people, especially people who couldn't afford it, they would keep these things. They would put nails in them, screws, things like that. You know, there were people like that. Today, you don't see it so much. So the argument that this is actually making a kli, the counter argument is that 80% of the people throw it out, maybe even 90%. So since 90% of the people throw it out, hopefully into the recycling, it's not a kli. A kli is something which has semi-permanent use, and not that you're just using it until the can runs out. So that if you don't make a hole in the bottom, it's still okay. So he does say to make a hole in the bottom. I'm giving you the counter argument, which Rabbi Ariel follows. Beseder?
Yes, and I have one more question.
Yeah.
It is prohibited to use a bicycle on Shabbat, but why everyone is using it on Yom Kippur? Maybe I missed the...
Okay, first of all, on Yom Kippur, which is a wonderful day in Tel Aviv, because literally nobody rides a car, not even the Arabs in Jaffa. It's really quite something. The ones who are riding the bicycles are predominantly children. And I would even say the majority of these children are not even from religious backgrounds, but they realize, hey, we got the whole city free to ride our bicycles. We're not going to take this opportunity. So that's exactly what happens. The kids who are first and foremost riding the bicycles are not necessarily religious. That's number one. Number two, a lot of people that say are traditionalists, they don't see the problem with the bicycle. To see a problem with the bicycle, you have to know a little bit of halakha, if you know what I mean. Because it looks at, bicycle is a big deal. I'm pedaling, it's moving around. And, right. Rabbi Ariel actually thinks that bicycles should be allowed on Shabbat. I had a neighbor across the way here. He was an orthopedist, and he worked at Shari Tzedek Hospital, which is about a half an hour bicycle ride from here. And he used to take his bicycle to work on Shabbat when he was on call. That I understand. Because if there's a problem with the bicycle, it's rabbinic. It's not from the Torah. So if you're working in a hospital, I can understand that. It makes a lot of sense. And I knew this guy was from a religious family. His father, too, who worked at Bar Ilan. What's the problem with the bicycle? Remember, it's a modern problem. Just like on Shabbat, we don't use musical instruments because you might fix them. You're playing guitar, string breaks. What usually you do, you take a new one out of the bag, you restring the guitar, and you continue. Takes a couple of minutes. The more experienced you are, the easier it is to do. You're not supposed to fix things that are broken. That's called tikkun kli. It's finishing a product. It's not allowed. That's already from the Torah. So just in case you might do that, you don't use the instruments at all on Shabbat, except in the Beit HaMikdash. The Levites can use them because rabbinic decrees are allowed in the temple. Because the Kohanim, the Levim, they know better. If their instrument breaks, they're not going to use it on Shabbat. So they know better. But the average person doesn't pay attention. So you can make the same argument about the bicycle. It's very common that the chain falls off and you just put the chain back on. But now you're doing tikkun kli. You're making the bicycle functional. That's a problem, even from the Torah on Shabbat. So that could be a problem with it. Because of that, rabbinically, it's a problem to have a bicycle on Shabbat. Again, when would it not be a problem? As I said, if you need it, let's say, to work at a hospital, and that's the only way you can get there. So when else would it not be a problem? If you can create a bicycle that doesn't have a chain. Or another example, let's say I have, what's it called? Rollerblades. So rollerblades are these wheels, right, that function under my skates. So roller skates or rollerblades probably be okay on Shabbat. Why? Because if they do break, you probably have to bring it back to the shop for it to be fixed. I don't think the individual can fix it just like that. Am I correct? Any rollerblader here? Anyhow, it seems to me that rollerblades, it's not something that you can fix. You actually need to go to a shop and they have to fix it, and then you go back. It's not like a bicycle chain that you just, fiddle around with it, put it back on, and then keep going. So in that sense, I think that would probably be allowed on Shabbat. I also think a skateboard would be allowed on Shabbat where there's an eruv, because I think it's the same problem. A wheel falls off on a skateboard. You need somebody who's really going to sit down and bang it in, and put it back into its place. It's not just a simple thing. Even if it's yourself, you got to go home, take out the hammer, take out the screwdriver, whatever it is, and start working on it. And you'll remember not to do that on Shabbat. So I would say that probably a skateboard where there's an eruv, and rollerblades, even when there's not eruv, as long as you're not carrying them, is probably allowed on Shabbat. So that could be something, unless I'm wrong of what I just defined now about the need for somebody who knows what they're doing to fix the rollerblades.
And
so I think,
so by the same token, you can also go ice skating, right? Not an Israeli problem, but in general, like
ice skating is another problem. First of all, you need to carry your ice skates to the rink.
And if there is no roof, then actually, and you
It's
can't
one thing.
rest on
And
the
number
spot.
two, even when you are ice skating, you're creating this impression all the time on the rink. It's a bit of a problem.
And hiking, can you go hiking? Not running, but
You can
hiking.
go hiking on Shabbat as long as you're within what's called Tchum Shabbat.
On Shabbat.
We didn't talk about that yet. It says on Shabbat, Ish al yetzei mimkomo b'yom Shabbat. No person shall leave their abode, their area on Shabbat. And the Talmud says your area is your city.
So
Unless
no
you're in
hiking.
the desert. If you're in
Yeah.
the desert, all you have is 4 cubits to each direction.
Okay.
Which is a human being with their hand over their head. Just like you can carry in a public area up to 4 cubits, which is 2 meters. Every cubit is half a meter. Because if you were lying on the ground with your hand stretched out, that's 4 cubits.
Okay.
So, but Tchum Shabbat, which is 2,000 amma, which is about 1 kilometer, is that's as far as you're allowed to walk outside the city on Shabbat in a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
You can walk in a not straight line, but I mean the limit is a straight line of 1,000 meters, and I think it's 1,000 meters of a bird's eye, meaning not up and down. If you had a direct line,
Okay.
That's what I think the Tchum Shabbat is, if I remember correctly.
Right.
There's such a thing of an Eruv, or you can extend the Tchum Shabbat before Shabbat in one direction if necessary, something necessary on the Shabbat, but normally Tchum Shabbat is 2,000. So yes, you can hike within that area.
Mm-hmm.
And also remember, if you're in Tel Aviv and you walk to Ramat Gan, you never left Tchum Shabbat because you're going from one city to another city. They're overlapping with each other. So you could go Ramat Gan, Givatayim, and Bnei Brak, Kiryat Ono, maybe right into Givat Shmuel. You can go quite far because these are cities that are overlapping what we call the greater area, metropolitan area of Tel Aviv. Even to the south, Yafo brings you to Bat Yam, to Cholon, for instance. So it gives you a lot of place to walk. But if you're hiking in the mountains, yeah, up to 2,000 cubits. Okay, let me just say a few last things about Muktze. So far, the only one I defined was Muktze Melachto Yisur, something which is an item whose primary purpose is prohibited on Shabbat. Pencils, appliances, empty pots and pans because you can't cook with them. I don't actually like that example because I told you, sometimes I need an empty pot. I want to make a fruit salad, and all I have is an empty pot. I don't have a bowl, so the empty pot is fine. You know what I mean? So it's not always good to, I would say the average person would have in mind that whatever I'm going to make the fruit salad in, I will. And as I said, even with Melachto L'Isur, you can redefine things. You can redefine a hammer to crack nuts, if it makes sense. Okay. I want to say one other thing about Melachto L'Isur and what of its leniencies. Let's say, I don't know, one of the kids left the hair dryer on the table for Shabbat. And you were about to set that table and you turn around after you lit the candles and there's now a hair dryer on it. You can move the hair dryer because it's called tzorech mekomo. You need the place of the hair dryer. Remember, since Muktze is rabbinic, same rabbis who defined Muktze said under what circumstances it can be bent. So Melachto L'Isur means tzorech mekomo means somebody left the hair dryer on the table. I can't set the table like that. And I'm not going to leave it in the middle of the table. I pick it up, put it to the closest place, which is not disturbing anybody, and that's it. That's Melachto L'Isur. And I can do that on Shabbat too. Because this is a rabbinic thing, and it's one of the things that were mentioned as part of the conditions of the this item of Muktze. I'm going to give one more definition of Muktze, which is a little bit harder, and that'll be it. It's called Muktze Machmat Gufo. Muktze because of what it is. I can show it to you also here, if you don't have the booklet. Items that are not fitting for any use on Shabbat. Rocks, trees, sand, wild animals, inedible foods such as raw meat, broken doors and windows. In other words, something which has no use also has no use on Shabbat. It's not necessarily that these things are going to be used for something which is prohibited, but they have no use at all. So they also become something you don't use on Shabbat because it has no use. Because again, the official definition of Muktze is it has no purpose that's going to enhance Shabbat. Now again, if this rock, I stumbled across it before Shabbat and I said, that rock is the best door stopper I've ever seen. I've already given it a designated purpose for Shabbat, and it's now out of the core category of Muktze Machmat Gufo. Muktze because of its inherent properties. But sand's on the beach. Dirt, It's outside. It's not something, rocks, pebbles, branches. These are not things I use for Shabbat. And therefore, they're Muktze. I'm not supposed to use them on Shabbat. So, for instance, the Hasidim, if they take rocks and start throwing it on cars on Shabbat, you're not allowed to. It's Muktze. They used to have in Jerusalem Hasidim throwing rocks and guys who drove cars on Shabbat. So somebody once came over to one of them and they said, "Hey, rocks are Muktze. How can you throw them on Shabbat?" He said, "We designated them from before Shabbat." But the problem is you can't designate something for an action you're not allowed to do on Shabbat, and probably you're not allowed to do it anytime. So, anyhow, that's what we call, Ibra Chocham. They want to be too smart. Okay.
Rabbi.
So that's called, so Muktze, again, yes.
What about the walking dogs?
Okay. A wild animal is Muktze because what do you have to do with a wild animal? Your animal is not.
No.
If I have an animal,
yeah,
it either lives with me or I feed it. Let's say these cats don't live with me. They just come, they like to walk in the house and look around and check to see I'm not hiding any food from them. But in general, they live on my porch and they go out in the wild. So if you have a connection with an animal, if you're a farmer, they need you, right? So no animal on the farm is Muktze. Your dog, your cat, your bird are not Muktze for you because they need you on Shabbat, and you are taking care of them. That's not Muktze. The question is my neighbor's dog Muktze? If I never have any contact with my neighbor's dog, then probably yes. But if, let's say, when I come over to my neighbor, I pet the dog, and sometimes I feed the dog, and sometimes they even ask me to come to feed the dog. So yes, I have a connection to that dog. So he probably would not be considered Muktze. Because it wouldn't be unusual for me to have some strange partial relationship with that dog, if you want to put it that way. So I know how else to say. I slightly take care of the dog, let's say. If that dog comes over, I can also pet the dog that sometimes comes to my house.
Yeah. So it means that if you feed wild cats, like in your neighborhood on Shabbat, you still can do it.
Yes, because if you feed a wild cat all the time, then it's your cat. But the truth is, even a wild cat that's not your cat, you're not touching it when you're feeding them. So it's not really a problem when there's an eruv. You can just put the food down, they can eat it. Right? We're talking about touching the cat in some way, moving it, petting it, whatever. So that would only be if you have some connection to the cat. There are people who are very strict about this. If there's a cat or dog which is not theirs, they won't touch it, even if it's their neighbor's house. But as I said, if you happen to be that neighbor often, it's probably not a problem.
But if I see...
Sorry, I asked this because I heard from other rabbis that why some Haredim they don't raise pets or any animals at home because it could break the halacha rules if you feed or if you take care of pets. So that's why I asked.
No, that doesn't make sense. The halacha always tells you what you can do and cannot do. So you can't decide in advance that something is going to break the rules of halacha and Shabbat when the halacha tells you what to do or what not to do. I find the Haredi community is afraid of dogs. They're not into dogs.
Okay, good to know the reason.
There are some Haredi who have dogs, but they're usually chazrim b'tshuva. There was a member of Knesset of Shas who used to raise snakes at home. So a pet is a pet, right?
My question, if I see a kitten or a cat or a dog that is dying and I've never seen him before, so I should walk away because it is Muktze?
The issue of pikuach nefesh, doche Shabbat, is only for humans. So I can only do things for that pet which would not break Shabbat. I can make them more comfortable. I could try to feed them, bring them some water, but I can't do things that would break Shabbat. I cannot carry them to the vet. I can't call the vet. I can ask maybe a non-Jew to call the vet because it's rabbinic and report it. But I cannot break Shabbat, things from the Torah, for an animal, even if it's my own animal.
And even if it's an animal that feeds you, meaning like a farm animal, like your livelihood depends on it,
Yes.
even then?
Yeah. It's only a human being. There's even a discussion about a non-Jew. Can I break Shabbat to save a non-Jew? In general, the halacha says yes, because if we don't do that, they're not going to save us on Shabbat, if you know what I mean. But I'm just saying that it's a difficult issue. But in general, it's like halacha sees it favorably, because in the end, you can't live among non-Jews and not save them if you want them to save you. Things have to be equal. You can try to do things rabbinically, if you know what I mean, but you cannot turn away when it comes to saving a life, even of a non-Jew. I'm sure there's a lot of discussion on it if you want to read about it. But that is the basic understanding.
So the Pikuach Nefesh can only be applied then to human and saving another human's life, nothing else outside of that.
That's right. With an animal, only things that are rabbinic. If you see an animal suffering, rabbinic things you can do. Because remember, Tzar Balei Chaim is also a Torah requirement. So things to alleviate the pain. But again, the things can only be, can only break Shabbat rabbinically, not from the Torah. Can't light a fire for them, whatever.
But you can call an ambulance, for example.
You can ask a non-Jew to call an ambulance.
Because the electricity is considered from the Torah because
there's a controversy whether electricity is from the Torah or not. I think we talked about it a little bit. It has to do with the definition of electricity. I know Rabbi Melamed talks about a lot of electricity being rabbinic. I don't understand 100% why he says that, because I know from Mechon Somed that they say electricity is tikkun kli, finishing a product, and that actually is from the Torah. So I don't really understand his argument. I guess I have to look into it more. So we treat electricity as more severe than that, especially if there's a light and there's heat, and he also says that. But yes, you can notify somebody about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I have a question regarding livelihood on Shabbat. Let's say a fire breaks out at your business, okay?
Right.
But there's no humans, there's no risk to human life, but there's a risk to your business, there's a risk to your livelihood, which then means you may not be able to feed your family due to that fire.
Right. So officially, the Talmud says that you can do passive things to stop the fire. For instance, I could put buckets of water in the line of fire of the fire, so the fire will hit the buckets of water and go out.
No, but I'm sorry, but like if there is a fire, just because it's contained now, it doesn't mean it's not going to kill anybody if it's untreated.
If the fire has any possible danger to human beings, even if it's a remote possible danger, then yes, you can be a firefighter and put it out on Shabbat. Not a question. But the question he asked is that it's certain that there's no danger to human beings, at the most to property. The answer to that is you can do passive things in halakha.
You're not directly deal with.
When there was that fire in Los Angeles and like a significant amount of the city was burnt down, there were people who were told to stay out of the area, and there was one guy who insisted to being at his house. He had all the sprinklers on constantly on his house, and because of that, the fire went around. Even a fire, will go to the easier path. That's just the way it goes. And he saved his house that way. So those type of things can be done on Shabbat when we're talking about property and not people. But people, even if it's a safek, even if it's a small possibility that that there's a danger to people, then the fire department can be Haredi, not a problem. By the way, in New York City, and even in Bnei Brak, the Hatzalah movement, which is an ambulatory, Haredi ambulatory service, they drive cars on Shabbat all the time. Because safek pikuach nefesh, also pushes off Shabbat, meaning even the remote possibility of saving a life pushes off Shabbat. A soldier in the army, they can do their shmira on Shabbat, even if they're religious. It's a question of indirect pikuach nefesh. They can carry their gun, etc. Okay, dear friends, I think we'll hold it at this for now. And I want to wish everybody Gemar Chatima Tova. We all be inscribed in the book of life. And yeah, I guess we'll meet. I'm not sure when the next Open Tuesday is. Well, let's see. I can check
I think we're gonna see you for Hoshana Rabbah for sure.
Hoshana Rabbah. I remember Rav Ariel asked me to come for Hoshana Rabbah. He also asked me to come for the Shabbat of Chol HaMoed to the Tel Aviv synagogue. Shabbat of interim Shabbat of the holiday. So I'll be there for both. Okay. Wait.
Thanks,
I need the names. Let's do this. Okay. So let's see who we have. I see Doron Haber. I think I still don't have you on the list for some reason in the computer. I don't know why.
It's there's a whole story behind it, Rabbi Ariel. No, it's okay.
Okay, so Alyssa Bernstein, and then I see Anna.
Shiraz Glusman is with Alex Ryan.
Hold it. Hodaya Peles, and I see also Max. Moment. That way. Bear. Okay, and let's see. Saskia and Yaakov. What's the family name again, Saskia?
Mine is Mühlhausen and Yaakov El-Maliach.
Thank you. El-Maliach. Okay, and I see Andrew Maimon. And Rachela first, Marcella first, and Victoria,
Choo-choo.
and Zenaida is here, and we're here. Let's go back here. Ildiko, and we said Alex Ryan. On this way. See now, Rinat.
Rinat Haroni and Moshe Shlomo Haroni.
And Moshe Haroni.
And then Shiraz Glusman is also with me, sir.
Okay, one moment. Alex and Shira. Glusman. Okay. And we said Amit Sher. And Christina. And then Haley. Lightman. Let's see who else.
Melissa.
And one moment. And Yo-Yo. And I see somebody I don't see the name for some reason because it's in Russian.
Yeah, it's me. I don't know how to change it.
Okay.
I'm Veronica Anbinder.
Anbinder, right? Anbinder. Okay. Who did I forget?
Serge.
George?
Likinski.
Anybody else?
Melissa.
Klaus.
How come I don't see
Patty.
a sec?
Melissa.
Oh, here. And Patty. And Matilda time. Matilda time. And Mano Levy. Dana Kogan and Gabi Levy. Dana Kogan and Gabi Levy. Anybody else?
Melissa.
What did I forget?
Eleonora.
A moment. Oh, here's Natan Gigi. Lots of people today. Natan Gigi, Ellie Horder, and Aaron Baba. I think I had that already, right?
And Anna
No.
Klaus.
Oh, wait a second. I want to make sure I have that. I don't remember now. Ellie Horder
Melissa.
and Iran. Where's Melissa?
Here.
How come I don't see you?
I'm with my phone. And I
Usually
can see you.
when you talk, you appear on the thing. Okay, Melissa, in here. Funny. Okay.
Anna Klaus.
I wrote you down, Anna.
I think you didn't call me.
Sorry?
Yael Elisa
I
Silava.
think you didn't call me.
Yael Silava. Yael Silava. And who?
Mathilde.
Oh, I didn't say Mathilde.
Mathilde.
Okay. Lots of people today. Wow. Skipped the whole thing. Okay. Gemar Chatima Tova, everybody. And hope to see you sometime on Sukkot.
Tzom Kal.
תודה רבה, גם לכם.
Bye.
חתימה טובה כולם.
חתימה טובה. שלום, שלום.